Hello viewers, today I am back with the second part of my lecture on the poets of the Elizabethan age. In my last lecture I had stopped with Edmond Spencer. I think I had just begun discussing Henry Constable, and will begin today with Henry Constable. We are discussing the sonneteers of the Elizabethan age. Henry Constable wrote numerous sonnets, but 28 of his sonnets written in a sequence called Diana, and 4 sonnets that he had dedicated to Sir Philip Sidney, collectively known as To Sir P. Sidney's Soul. And these 4 sonnets were also prefixed to Philip Sidney's Apology for Poetry. Now these constitute his best work. We really don't know much about this lady called Diana, but when you go through his sonnets, you can clearly feel that the influence of both Spenser and Sidney was very much, there in all that he composed. And one of his sonnets, My Lady's Presence Makes the Roses Red, this really captures, Spenser's charm. Like Sidney, he followed that mixed Italian and English rhyme scheme, where the octave was Italian and the rest was English. We now come to Samuel Daniel. Samuel Daniel is known for a sequence of 50 sonnets entitled Delia, and this is addressed to a living lady whose identity has been variously surmised. He was a great friend of Drayton. I'll be talking about Drayton immediately after I complete Daniel. Now, together with Drayton, he popularized the English form of sonnet writing, and we have discussed the English form of sonnet writing in our last session. I talked about 3 quatrains and 1 couplet, 3 quatrains that are not interlinked and that have obviously alternating rhyme scheme. So his sonnets are mostly on love, and it is said that he laid the foundation for Shakespeare's masterly handling of the form. Form means the English form of writing sonnets. And one of his sonnets is written on sleep. Now, while discussing the basic features or the basic characteristics of sonnet, Elizabethan sonnet, I said that most of the sonnets were written on love, but there are a few written on some other topics, and one of those happens to be sleep. So Samuel Daniel had written a sonnet on Care Charmer Sleep. We now come to Michael Drayton. He was a prolific writer, and his work generally is not of high order. He is known for a sequence called Ideas Mirror. And Ideas Mirror contains 51 sonnets. Now in Ideas Mirror, he honors a lady whose identity is once again a matter of conjecture. He calls her Idea, and this concept of the idea comes from Plato. So he is once again idealizing the lady. The lady is turned into a concept. And he was also following the French writer. He was very much inspired by a French writer, Pontou, Pontous, and Pontou was known for writing a sonnet sequence, La ID, I-D-E-E. You have all kinds of sonnets in this collection, but there is once again one that really stands out. Since there is no help, come, let us kiss and part. This is magnificently written, and it is one of the best sonnets ever written, and Drayton's chief title to glory even today. Finally, we come to the master, William Shakespeare. We all know that he has written 154 sonnets. 126 of these are addressed to a young man with whom he had a deep friendship. From 1 127 to 152, the sonnets are addressed to a dark lady, a mysterious dark lady, and the last two sonnets, 153 and 154, they are addressed to the Greek god of love, Cupid. Okay. Now, of these 154 sonnets, two sonnets, When My Love Swears That She Is Made of Truth, and the other one, Two Loves I Have of Comfort and Despair. Now, these two sonnets were published in William Jaggard's anthology, which was entitled The Passionate Pilgrim, in 1599. And all the sonnets were published, as a collection by Thomas Thorpe, Thorpe, in 1609. Now, these sonnets, or rather this collection, was dedicated to Mr. W.H. Once again, a mysterious shortening of the name. There has been all kinds of guesswork. Now, this Mr. W.H. can be the young Earl of Southampton, Henry Wriothesley. Henry, Wriothesley, to whom Shakespeare dedicated his Venus and Adonis and also Lucrece. This W.H. can be the Earl of Pembroke, William Herbert, to whom Shakespeare's friends Condell and Hemming dedicated the first folio of his plays in 1623. Now, these sonnets, as I told you, they are not addressed to one person. You have a young man who happens to be the poet's young patron, and you have a woman who is colored ill. Now, if a woman is colored ill, then obviously she is a dark lady. Some critics feel that this woman was a lady called Mary Fitton, and when the sonnet sequence begins, we find that the poet is deeply attached to the young man, and there has been all kinds of interpretations of this relationship, including homosexuality. And towards the middle, we discover that the patron has transferred his favors to a better spirit, that is obviously a rival poet, who can be, among others, Chapman. And when we move on after sonnet 126, we are introduced to the dark lady. Now, it is very difficult to say whether these sonnets are autobiographical, for not much is known about Shakespeare's life, but we get an impression of his life and times when we go through the entire collection. If you talk about the poetical quality, around 50 of these sonnets are really of very high order, and there are some sonnets that verge on the obscene, but the best of his sonnets undoubtedly handle the English form of sonnet writing in the best possible manner. We can talk about sonnet number 29, When in Disgrace with Fortune and Men's Eyes, or sonnet number 30, When to the Sessions of Sweet Silent Thought, or sonnet number 33, Full many a glorious morning have I seen, or sonnet number 65, Since brass nor stone nor art nor boundless sea, and also sonnet number 116, Let me not to the marriage of true minds. So this was all that we need to know about the sonneteers, at least at this juncture. Let us now get to know a little bit about the lyricists. We discussed the lyric form in our last session. Like the sonnet, the formal lyric was popularized in England by Wyatt and Surrey. While Surrey is the superior of the two in the sonnet, he has nothing equal to Wyatt's and wilt thou leave me thus. This is a very famous lyric by Wyatt, And if you read this particular lyric, you will realize that how superior Wyatt was as a lyricist, and undoubtedly Sare had surpassed him in the field of sonnet writing. The next important lyric writer after them is Sidney, and the lyrics, appear in the sonnet sequence Astrophil and Stella. He had attached a few lyrics in this particular collection. You do come across a few lyrics, and also along with Philip Sidney, there are other writers like John Lilly. Now he was the first among the Elizabethan dramatists who introduced lyrics into his plays. It is surprising that one who began his literary career as a prose romancer, we'll talk about Elizabethan prose in one of our sessions, of course, and who wrote all his plays except one in prose, could write such delightful songs. There's such a beautiful natural flow in these songs. If you look at his prose fiction, Euphues, the primary defect of John Lilly is his labored diction, but you don't come across these constraints, in his lyrics. If I talk about his lyrics, there are very sweet lyrics like, what bird so sings, yet so does wail. Another lyric, Cupid and my Campaspe played. This was in Alexander and Campaspe. And also, my Daphne's hair is twisted gold, and sing to Apollo, god of the day. Now these two lyrics, my Daphne's hair is twisted gold and sing to Apollo, god of day. These two lyrics are included in his play Midas, Midas, Midas. Among lyricists, we would also like to include Thomas Lodge. Most of his lyrics are contained in the sonnet sequence Phyllis, Phillis, and in his prose romances, of which Rosalind is the chief. So he would include lyrics in prose romances, and also he would attach lyrics to his sonnet sequences. Now his lyrics are light and playful, and he produces beautiful musical effects. For instance, the lyric that you find in Rosalind, love in my bosom like a bee. Now Robert Greene, he also wrote lyrics, and his lyrics are interspersed in his prose pamphlets and romances. He was a delightful singer like the rest of his tribe, and he had a fondness for classical allusions and a kind of euphuistic style, and he tried to keep pace with the fashion of the day. His subject is mostly love of the conventional sort, but sometimes he can be pathetically personal. Lyrics were mostly impersonal in those days, but especially if you read his verses written in the poet's last illness. This to be found in his book Groatsworth of Wit, Groatsworth, Groatsworth of Wit. There you have these verses included. Now these verses express his repentance for his misspent life. Now his best lyrics include, fair is my love for April's in her face, and also sweet are the thoughts that savor of content, and also this one, were she pitiful as she is fair. William Shakespeare, he was also a lyricist, and he wrote around 100 lyrics, and they all appear in his plays to suit the occasion in each, and their subjects are numerous. They can range from mere fun to the deepest questions about life and death. There are all kinds of, lyrics in all kinds of, verse forms, and there are lyrics that are, very much related to the folk song, and also ones that are related to the saddest elegies. He has experimented a lot in the form and the meter. Now, it is by this variety in subject and form that they appear superior to the sonnets, which are all on one subject and in one form. Milton's phrase, native wood notes wild. Native wood notes wild. Now, this particular phrase by Milton can beautifully sum up the character of Shakespeare's lyrics. Now, they are native because their subjects and tone are English. They are wood notes because they are tuned unto the sweet bird's throat. They are very natural and very melodious, and they are wild because their structure is their own rather than the ordered classical one. The lyrics of Shakespeare alone can assure his place in the world of literature. They are so excellently written, whether they are trivial or grave, whether they are rough or polished. They are ever light and airy, and among the best, we can mention the icicles, when icicles hang by the wall. This is in Love's Labour's Lost. And also you have Tell Me Where Is Fancy Bred. This is from The Merchant of Venice. Sigh no more, lady, sigh no more. This is from Much Ado About Nothing. Under the Greenwood Tree. This is from As You Like It. O mistress mine, where are you roaming? This is from Twelfth Night. And Take, oh take those lips away. This is from Measure for Measure. Among the lyricists, we can mention Thomas Campion. In his book Observations in the Art of English Poesy, Campion attacked the use of rhyme in poetry, as Sidney and Spenser had done slightly earlier, and yet, like them too, he wrote beautiful verse in rhyme. That's really very, very paradoxical. The English spirit is very strong in them all, and undoubtedly in those times people were inclined towards the Latin system of unrhymed verse, but Campion's lyrics, they are beautifully rhymed. And you generally find Campion's lyrics in 3 books of songs. One is called A Book of Airs, A-Y-R-E-S, 2 books of airs, and the 3rd and 4th book of airs. To many of these he provided his own notations or directions to set them to music. As their title says, they are airs or songs meant to be sung and therefore melodious to read or hear. So the most important feature of lyricism in the Elizabethan age, I've told you, is melody. So that was very much there in Campion's lyrics. Like those of other writers, these lyrics are also largely on love. And speaking of love in various moods and meters, some are best of their class, and we can just mention a few. There is a garden in her face. When thou must home to shades of underground. Or this one, I care not for these ladies. And also this one, hark all you ladies that do sleep. These are all lyrics by Campion. Now we will talk about Ben Jonson when we come to Elizabethan drama. We know that Ben Jonson was famous for writing comedy of humor, And many of the lyricists that I just now mentioned, they will come back, as dramatists and as prose writers. Many of them were university wits. Many of them were writers of Elizabethan prose fiction. We will come back to Sidney when we discuss Arcadia. We'll come back to Lily when we discuss Euphues. And Shakespeare obviously will be there very much when we discuss Elizabethan drama. Ben Jonson, we will come back to him because he is known for a writer of plays, especially comedy of humor. Now he also followed the contemporary fashion of introducing songs into plays, and he wrote 3 separate books of non-dramatic verse entitled Epigrams, The Forest and Underwoods. And the last 2, The Forest and Underwoods, contain his lyrics, and they include pastorals, dirges, epitaphs, odes, love songs. And Jonson was a lover of ancient classics. He was a neoclassical writer, unlike Shakespeare, who was a romantic writer. Therefore, the lyrics are carefully written, but they are not inspired art. They are rather very traditional kind of stuff written on nature, on love, on life, on death, on dress. There's one lyric, in the book, The Forest, drink to me only with thine eyes. Though it is a paraphrase, from a letter of the Greek writer Philostratus, but it is one of the most perfect lyrics in English. And there are others, the still popular ones. For instance, in Cynthia's Revels, you have this lyric, Queen and huntress, chaste and fair. In Volpone, you have, Come, my Celia, let us prove. In The Silent Women, you have, Still to be neat, still to be dressed. I told you that the satirists, so this is all we are going to discuss today. On the lyricists, we have already discussed the sonneteers. We come to the last category, the satirists. I told you that satire was not a very popular form during the Elizabethan period because people didn't have much to complain about. The regular verse satire was written in this age chiefly by 4 writers. You need to remember 4 writers. One was Gascoigne, and if you talk about his best work, then I would say Steel Glass, S-T-E-E-L-E, Glass, G-L-A-S. Okay, this is perhaps the first regular verse satire in English. Okay, the title is very significant. The poet is holding the old-fashioned steel glass in his hand to show the society its true image. Okay, so the next writer is John Dunn. John Dunn will have a very important place in our sessions because we will be discussing metaphysical poetry, maybe in our next session itself, because as we take up Jacobean age, metaphysicals will come in. We know he was a prolific writer. He was someone who would bring about revolution in poetry writing, and his verse admits of 3 divisions. John Donne wrote amorous verse, religious verse, and also satirical verse. And you might say that in all these 3 forms, he gave a new turn to English poetry, and we will consider him in detail. His satires are 5 in number, published with the bulk of his other verse posthumously. None can be said to be on one particular subject. Each of these satires is listing a number of abuses at a time, and altogether they are assailing the snobbish courtier, the superstitious Puritan, the dandy, the shameless plagiarist, the lustful lover, and the evildoer. They lack humor, and they are written in unpolished heroic couplets. I think the satires are the least characteristic part of John Donne's works. The third writer will be Joseph Hall. Joseph Hall, he was known for a collection, Virgidi Miorum, Virgidemiarum. Now, in Virgidi Miriam, you have 6 books of satires, the first three of which he called toothless, and the last three he called biting. The first three are called toothless and the last three are called biting. And the fourth great writer of satire was Marston, John Marston, and his chief book of satires is The Scourge of Villainy. He appended certain satires to his metamorphosis of Pygmalion's image, and also, but the book was publicly burnt by an order of the church. The Scourge justifies its title. It whips men and manners, but more out of anger than for their good. Its heroic couplets also failed to impress, but together with Hall, he prepared the way for Drayton and Pope, and he obviously had a definite contribution in the world of satire writing. Apart from these four writers, we should also mention Wyatt's satirical verses of the courtier's life. This appeared in Tottle's Miscellany. Spenser's Mother Hubbard's Tale. It's an allegorical satire on the abuses of the court and the church. Lodges a fig for Momus, addressed to the god of the satire. It keeps very close to the form. Ben Jonson, he also sometimes used his plays, the Poet Esther, the New Inn, and others to attack his rivals or detractors. So all these writers, though they were not satirists, but they indulged in satire in some form or the other. Now, as we are leaving Elizabethan age, at least for the moment, I must tell you that we have to give a lot more space and time to Edmond Spencer, and it is not really possible to round up Edmond Spencer within such a short scope. But as I go, I must tell you that his Amoretti and Mother Hubbard's Tale have already been considered, because I talked about Amoretti while discussing sonnets, and just now I talked about Mother Hubbard's Tale while talking about the satires written in the Elizabethan age. His other works include the Shepherd's Calendar. And now it is a series of 12 eclogues, one for each month of the year, describing Colin Cloud's. Colin Cloud is Spencer himself. Colin Cloud's unrequited love for Rosalind, standing for a lady he loved in his early life, and containing interesting references to political and religious conditions and literary friends and patrons. Astrophel, it's a pastoral elegy, the first in English literature, on the death of Sir Philip Sidney. Epithalamion, it's a nuptial song on his own marriage. Prothalamion is a similar song on the marriage of the two daughters of the Earl of Worcester. 4 hymns were written in honor of love, beauty, heavenly love and heavenly beauty. And finally, the Fairy Queen. We'll be needing a lot of time to discuss the Fairy Queen. We know it's an incomplete epic romance. It spans a little over 6 books, and it's an allegory. It's a threefold allegory. It's a moral allegory, religious allegory, and a political allegory. So we will consider Fairy Queen very soon, and Fairy Queen might be called the greatest work of Spenser. It's true that he attempted a variety of verse forms: the pastoral, the satire, the elegy, the sonnet, the nuptial song, and also the epic romance. But in whatever he wrote, 2 separate influences were at work on his works, that of Renaissance and that of Reformation. To the former, he owed his interest in life and its pleasures, beauty, love, nature, art, chivalry. And to Reformation, I think he owed the lofty ideal of moral and spiritual excellence. You find that expressed in many of his works, including Fairy Queen. Now, though opposed to each other, one is earthly, the other is heavenly, they are harmoniously blended in all his works. And among the English poets, he was most indebted to Chaucer, from whom, in his own words, he his song did learn. In particular, he learned from him the art of storytelling. Chaucer taught him that. The device of the allegory, the happy use of ancient and solemn words. He was very much attracted to Chaucerian stanza. He uses Chaucerian stanza in 4 hymns. He was undoubtedly a storyteller, but he, like Chaucer, he didn't have the insight into life and character. And he had a magic world of his own. He had allegorical personages, and these allegorical personages were lacking in free will, and they were directed by forces beyond them. He had that power to paint pictures in words. He really could be very, very capable of thrilling the senses with colorful pictures. And his style is distinguished by rich musical quality, and he paid particular attention to the use of words, provided a word expressed his meaning to the full and was sweet to his ear. He did not really mind if that word was rustic, old, obsolete, or new. In the Fairy Queen, he invented a 9-line stanza known after his own name, which reproduces the first 9 lines of his sonnet rhyme AB, BC, BC, C, with this difference only that the 9th line, instead of being an iambic pentameter like the rest, is an alexandrine, okay, or a line of 6 iambic feet. Chaucer's language, which he adopted as his model, was archaic even in his own day, being the language of nearly 2 centuries back. He therefore was never a poet of the people who understood only current language, but right from his own age to the present, the greatest poet, and sometimes whole schools of them, have been influenced by one or the other of his qualities. They include poets like Shakespeare, Milton, Drayton, Pope, Wordsworth, the Romantic School, Tennyson, the Pre-Raphaelites, W.B. Yeats. Therefore, we may really agree with Lamb. He was the poet's poet. So here is where I am closing this chapter on the poets of Elizabethan age. We can come back for detailing later on. And in the next session, we'll move on to some other age and some other topic. Thank you for your patience. See you soon.